All right, let's get started. We only have half an hour. We got lots of things to talk about here. We got a full crew coming in. Let's get to it. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the second monthly webinar from Cyentia. I'm David Severski. I'm joined by my wonderfully handsome co-presenter, Wade Baker.
Hey, everybody. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us here on a topic that's near and dear to our heart. We are going to be talking about, if I can work on the slides here. There we go. Attacking the iris and vericizing all the things everywhere. Super excited to be talking about this. Is research that's not yet out yet. So I suppose I'll give a little bit of a disclaimer that some of the graphics you may see are preview and maybe subject to change. I don't think they'll change in any substantial way, but you know, there's always the opportunity for that last minute, oops, we're off by 0.1 decimal points to fix all that up. So let's go ahead and get started there. We are going to try to do questions and answers. There's only half an hour and that time's going to go by super quickly. So if you have questions there, go ahead and use the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. If for whatever reason we don't get through all of them, we will try to respond via email. You can always write to us at research or info@cyentia.com, and we're happy to chat about any and all the things we've talked about here today. Fantastic. So I think many of you, just looking at some of the folks that have registered, may be familiar with the IRIS series, but just as a way of background there, you know, the Information Risk Insight Study, or IRIS, is, oh goodness, we have what, 5 or 6 of them now out in the public side. Time flies fast there. So the IRIS is our research series focusing upon what happens when all the controls that we are working on actually fail. Are not sufficient for whatever threats that are coming against, whether that be insiders, external actors, errors, etc. out there. We started this out in IRIS 2020, and we've gone through several iterations since then, most recently with IRIS 2022 with the grateful support of CISA. It's been a fantastic series of research out there. We'll talk a little bit more about IRIS and how that goes into its sibling, the Retina series, and specifically into the VERIS attack elements today. So starting off with IRIS, both IRIS 2020, the subsequent reports then, and IRIS 2022, we focused upon this concept of frequency and loss. And kind of our culmination of many of these things has been in the LEC, the loss exceedance curve. For those of you that may be coming from a quantitative risk background there, or cyber risk quantification, CRQ, as I think the Gartner term for it is these days, you are probably very familiar with these loss exceedance curves, which are saying, given some probability, what is the chance you will have this much loss or greater in any given period, in this case, a 12-month period there. These LECs are bread and butter for CRQ, whether that be FAIR or some other methodology there. And we've been super happy to be able to produce these. This has been part of a long collaboration we've had with Advisen, part of Xywave, using their commercial feed of publicly available event information. And we'll talk more about that as we go on to the methodology. And so these LECs have been super helpful for people there, but that's not all that's in IRIS. We have actually gone beyond that and talked about patterns of losses. These are high-level categories of what are the typical things that we see out there in types of losses. We see, system intrusion is very heavily represented both in frequency and loss. Ransomware is right about on that dotted line there. So that's about equal in terms of frequency and the share of losses that it represents. This is a good step towards showing something about more the nature of these types of events that are happening out there, and how can defenders be trying to tailor their defenses and their controls to focus on what matters most. But, this is just scratching the surface of kind of that tactical threat information. And IRIS is not just a quant-only publication. We believe there's lots of more use cases out there than just cyber risk quantification. We believe there's a lot of information out there from a tactical perspective as well. We started to show that off in IRIS 2022. We showed off our then very new capabilities to do attack classifications, which we'll be talking much more about here, where we showed here are the initial attack vectors that were present in our data set. This is a great step forward for tactical security practitioners, and we think there's a lot more we can do about that, which we'll be talking about here today.
So again, as David said, the IRIS series is mainly about quantifying frequency and losses for risk assessment and management. But we have wanted to get more tactical with it so that security people can make defensive decisions and figure out which controls and that kind of thing. And if you can imagine it, there's a gap between the high level frequency and losses and how incidents actually occur. And you're probably familiar with another report that's out there, the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, which is really on the other end of that spectrum. It doesn't have anything about dollar losses and things like that, but it has a ton of information about who's behind these incidents, what do we know about them, what methods are they using, what kind of systems are affected, and all of that kind of thing. I had the privilege of working on the DBIR for the first 8 years of its existence. And I've kind of always wanted to get back to some of those things. You know, it's kind of like a drug. When you have all of that information and that insight, you miss it when it's gone. So I'm thrilled to say that we have actually been doing a lot of work and having some success blending these sort of CRQ and threat intel incident response realms. So if you pop to the other slide, I like to think about what we're doing here and what we want to talk about today as something like the DBIR, but with dollars. You know, if we could take the tactical level threat information represented in reports like the DBIR and merge those with the stuff that we're doing in the IRIS about dollars and frequencies, then we might get something that is really cool, right? And that's our goal. And this is what we want to talk about, where we have tried to apply to our high-level loss information VERIS categorizations that are used in the DBIR, and also the MITRE ATT&CK classification, so that we can riskify this kind of information. And we'll tell you about our trials and tribulations therein. It's not all smooth sailing. We've been working on it for a long time, but we are making progress. So David, back over to you to get into some of those methodologies.
Thank you so much, Wade. So let's talk about this. So we're gonna
gotta have the cat.
You gotta have the cat. You know, it's required. I gotta satisfy my public on that. So we're going to talk about this in two separate sections. There's one which is the attackification, and second would be the versification, to use the verb forms of both these frameworks there. Both of them are very valuable frameworks there. They serve somewhat different purposes there, and we believe that having both of these together is really powerful for looking at the patterns that are present in these events, and what we can learn from them. So just by way of reference, ATT&CK is a framework from the fantastic folks at MITRE, super popular these days there. And there's a lot of stuff in there. What we're looking at here is just a snapshot of all of the enterprise things that are out there. They're broadly broken into these phases that stretch from reconnaissance all the way over through the exfiltration and impact side. I will say, this is not meant to be strictly a kill chain style type of thing, but you can broadly think of it, if you squint your eyes in the right way, that things start off at the left, reconnaissance, they move into infiltration and the middle event and lateral movement, and then they wind up having an impact upon an organization. So we'll talk a little bit more about this and about how we actually apply this. This is a super popular framework for defenders. And, MITRE ATT&CK has been out there for a while now. I believe the current version is like version 12.1, which is like really high version numbers. I'm expecting it to switch to years and months and anytime soon. It seems to be what happens once you get up to double digits. So let's a little talk about how we actually do this. So this is kind of attacking the unknown, and we're using this not terribly secret blend of herbs and spices or facts and figures to actually derive information about this. As I've mentioned a couple of times here, we're using primarily the data set from Advisen and Zywave, fantastic partners of ours that have this very large corpus that's very broad in events that have actually materialized for organizations. These are things that you can get from Freedom of Information Acts, court filings, news information, et cetera there. And there's hundreds of thousands of events out there spanning decades of cyber malfeasance of one sort or another out there. In our work on IRIS, we typically focus upon a 10-year time span there that allows us to get something that is consistent and still have a large enough historical information. But as I mentioned, the advice and inside wave information is very broad. It doesn't go into full forensic detail on all these events. I mean, that's just not practical to do at scale, at least at this point in time. So the question is, how do we go from the information that we do know about it to where we don't have information? Well, fortunately, there's a whole body of statistical learnings about this, which is called inference. Using stats and math and the human brain power to go from information that we know to fill in the gaps for information we want to know. In our case, we're taking information such as the malware varieties that are involved, the attack vectors that are being used, the actor types, and then a lot of natural language processing on free text, such as descriptions, et cetera, there. We use all of this to get to the attack elements that are the techniques, the things that are actually being done, the software, which in the MITRE framework, you can kind of think of as the malware strains typically, the groups, which are the actors behind that. And then very interesting for our conversation here today is the mitigations, the things that can actually be employed to stop these things from occurring. And of course, much more out there as well. Just to put that in context and give our conversation a little more weight and depth there, you can take an example of this. If we see something out there that involves in the description that is a Conti ransomware there, we know from MITRE and from other research there that there's a known actor group that does that. This includes our Wizard Spider group out there, which is known by several different names. And there are known techniques that are used by that, command and scripting interpreters, process injections, remote services, and so forth. But we can also break it down into those phases that we saw from that big chart earlier there of where are these things occurring in the stage of life cycle of an attack. In the initial access, we see phishing is what's commonly used for this particular event. In the mid-event stage, we have network share discovery that's used for laterally moving within an organization. And then data exfiltration, well, it's ransomware, so data encryption for impact is where we see that thing impacted, actually occurring. All in all, when we do all this for our data set, we have over close to 150,000 instances of attack techniques being employed. That's a huge body of actual things that are being classified according to the MITRE ATT&CK framework there. That's spanning over 128 different top-level techniques. That's not even including all the sub-techniques involved. What's super exciting, at least from my perspective, and I hope from your perspective as well as a defender, we can match mitigation techniques to this and say, now that we know from a MITRE perspective what is being involved here, we can start to hypothesize about what types of controls would be most useful for stopping these things from occurring. So let's get, of course, and I don't often use Sun Tzu, but I think this is a good opportunity to use that. In the Art of War quote about knowing thy enemy and knowing yourself. By knowing what the enemy has done successfully, we can start to talk about what types of things may actually help us prevent those in the future. Okay, let's talk about some of the things we've actually seen here. So initial access techniques. So these are the things on the far left. So the things that actually allow the attacker to get a foothold into this. And what we see here from a frequency perspective is that phishing is represented in 4 out of 10 of the events that we saw here there. With other common events, so valid accounts, drive-by compromise, exploiting public-facing applications there, 2, 3, and 4 out there. This is consistent with what we've seen in IRIS work and extreme work in general and Tsunami in other IRIS publications that we can, it's often the common things. It is the user that is often the attack vector that people are using to get into these organizations. But it's not enough to just look at the frequency that's involved here. You can actually look at, the valid accounts. That particular technique is associated with over 90% of all the recorded financial losses in our particular data set. That's huge out there. But don't take our word for it. We can talk a little bit about the data exfiltration, or to give apologies to the Beastie Boys, the Rhymin and Stealin part of the attack chain, where things actually go wrong. So right now we're focusing upon this far right-hand side. Again, not MITRE's, not a full attack chain, but it's useful to kind of think of that in those terms, at least for this conversation there. Now we're going to talk about what actually could prevent these things, given what we know about the initial access techniques. And we can see out there that in this case, we're saying what the attackers actually do. 4 out of 10 using data encryption for impact. So this is your ransomware style events out there. And then 25% involved with inhibiting system recovery and system stop, another about 25%. It's interesting to note here that system shutdown reboot was tied to about 42% of all reported losses. And that's number 2 overall. What's number 1? Well, you might have to read the report to find out that one. So now we can actually go to kind of the exciting part of this. What are the applicable mitigations around this? And perhaps not surprisingly, given what we've seen from the frequency side there, it is user-oriented stuff out there. Number 1 out there is user training. We've had some great relationships with folks on the human security side as well. We've done work with Elevate and others out there. And user training it is great to be. I don't want to blame the user out there, but that is where we can actually get a lot of bang for the buck in terms of what techniques are actually relevant to these. Restrict web-based content, software configuration. Now we're getting into more of the traditional bread and butter style of controls out there, antivirus, endpoint protection, network intrusion out there, all make significant presence on our list out there. So I think this is a super exciting application of attack, and there's much more of this in the report. So that being said, there's another framework out there called VERIS. Wade, do you want to talk a little bit about VERIS and why you might want to use that?
Before I get in there, I'll address a question from Alexander. Report is going to be available soon. We'll tell you about that in a moment. But the things that we're working on here will sort of progressively make their way to lots of the things that we're doing. We actually used this a little bit in another report that was not in the IRIS series that we published recently on ransomware, and we kind of integrated some of these things into there. So you'll see these as we go along, spread through a lot of our research. And the other question was about linking with CIS Common Defense Model. The answer is no, not right now. We, as far as our mitigations go, we are starting with the ties that MITRE links with their techniques and mitigations. However, I'm about to talk about VERIS, and I believe that prior DBIRs have linked to CIS and others, and there's some chaining to go along. So we will look for ways to bring in all of these things as we go forward. So I like the idea. All right, let's talk about vericizing all the things. This again is fun for me because I was involved in the creation of VERIS. Really did want to see all incidents vericized and put out there in the public domain. And it's nice to practice this a little bit. So let's get in here if you don't mind pushing forward. And actually, I think I can cover this, David. We're applying similar things to discern these VERIS classifications as we did with the MITRE techniques. With MITRE, we're focused mainly on attack techniques. With VERIS, if you're familiar with it, there's these 4 A's that are used to describe the things that occur in the chain of events that constitute an incident. We want to know something about the actor, the actions that they employ, the assets that they compromise, and the security attributes of those assets that are compromised when that happens, whether it's confidentiality, integrity, availability, et cetera. So trying to discern those from the available information that David went over when we were talking about MITRE is what we're trying to do here. Anything else to add regarding that, David?
No, I think you covered well. Just in previous IRIS conversations there, we've talked about our predictive models there for those patterns and categories there, which forms kind of the basis of, well, part of the basis of what we're using there. I would say it is a challenging process to get to that full 4 A's description there, but yep. I'm super happy with the results so far.
Yeah, and I want to contrast too that when you read the DBIR, you are benefiting from the analysts there that have looked at those events, each one of them, and applied those vericizations, as we used to call them, to those events. And that's hard time-consuming manual work. And we don't have that luxury because we're trying to apply these things to over 100,000 incidents at scale. And so it's a different type of approach to trying to get to the same place. So I'm going to preview some of the things that just kind of show what we're finding out and proving that it works. If you,
I can speak to this here,
okay.
just for the results perspective there, just as we saw with the attack information there, we see lots of these. So, on the frequency side, we have over 1 million of these pairings out there. We could probably go into great detail and talk about how those pairings can overlap and so forth there. But in the interest of time, I'll just say, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's over 130,000 of these on the loss side. It's often that we can get event information. Getting loss information is harder, though we still have a lot of it out there. And, this allows us to create something that's like an A4. This is not our A4. This is one out of the most recent DBIR, but we can go into some more detail about what those things actually produce. So let's talk about what our findings are, and I can let Wade talk about these.
Yeah, I just picked a scattering of charts from here. This is looking at threat actors. Like the DBIR, when we look at this body of incidents, it's just overwhelmingly external threat actors. I don't want to discount internal threat actors, but when you just look at the large scale mass of incidents, mostly external. Again, when we first published the DBIR, I remember people just being very angry about that, but it's proven true in just about every data set I've looked at. When you look at the median loss magnitude, because again, the big new thing here is that we can not only just do frequency and break it down by relative frequency, we can start looking at the losses associated with these. And we can look at total losses, but this looks at the median loss magnitude for events that involve an external threat actor, an internal, or a partner. And you might be surprised to know that even though third parties are the least frequent category of threat actor, the typical loss magnitude for those is the highest. So take that into consideration when you're managing various sources of risk for your organization. And we can go down further than these. We can go to compare state affiliated actors and organized criminals. If you want to compare the highest mean loss for those state actors are twice the median loss magnitude of organized cyber criminals. Let's head over to actions. So there are 7 main categories of threat actions in VERIS. Environmental is missing here. We don't have any of those in this data. But you can see that a large proportion involve malware and hacking. These are not mutually exclusive, by the way. And in this one, we took to show you the total recorded financial losses that are associated with events that involve malware or hacking, et cetera. So malware is both the most frequent and most costly. And ransomware specifically as a subtype of malware was in the top spot in 2022 for frequency. And web application exploits, which in VERIS is under hacking, was the highest in terms of losses. Combining assets and attributes here just to save a little bit of time and to dig into a little place that's kind of interesting. So this looks specifically when the attribute of loss is confidentiality to whatever asset that is. We're looking at different types of data that is compromised in those events. And we're trying to show sort of frequency and losses. So you can see that personal identifiable information, PII, is the most frequently stolen type of data. But corporate loss of financial assets is, comparatively rare, but an outsized proportion of losses. So, if you're trying to run scenarios in your organization and you're worried about particular types of data being stolen under various conditions, information like this might be able to assist with those kinds of assessments and decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wade. So yes, in a few minutes, just want to give a blatant sales pitch there. So IRIS Risk Retina is different from much of the work that we do. Unlike our sponsored research there, where we have where we're working directly with vendors such as Cisco or Veracode, or we have sponsorship with organizations such as CISA there. These are ones that we're actually offering to buy, to license there for your internal use there. The intention here with the Risk Retina series is to take the work that we've done on IRIS and give you a deep dive into your particular organization. This is to take a look at the analytical reports focused upon the things that matter most to you. We have information available at Cyentia.com/retina. We have a variety of these reports available, one of which is the VERIS and ATT&CK one. I saw a question about when is that coming out? We've got a February date on this one there. We might just make that, might be early March, depending upon the way that the editing guides go for us right now. But we are making this available to enterprises and other organizations to buy, which gives you a license to use the report for whatever purposes you have internally for your organization to help focus both not on a quantitative perspective, but also a qualitative and tactical perspective on this. We're super excited about the work that's been done on this. And we're super excited that folks have come out for a webinar such as this. So the street price on this is just a flat $15,000. We're trying to make this super easy. We're not super high pressure salespeople, so we'd like to put the price right out there and let you know what it is. That being said, you, as attending this webinar, get an automatic 25% discount on this particular Retina report. So if you are interested in this or just want to chat more about this and what could be useful for your organization, you can reach out to us at retina@Cyentia.com, mention that you were on this webinar, and we'll give you an automatic 25% right off there. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible.
And just something to add on that, you can think of this as sort of consulting. I mean, we're a data science and research firm, so we don't do a lot of consulting, but we've done a ton of analytical work and a lot of analysis to put these reports together. So you sort of get the Cyentia benefit and effort wrapped in these reports, and hopefully you don't have to pay a big, external consulting firm to give you some really good information to start from and support your cyber risk assessment decisions.
The whole idea with both the IRIS and the Retina series is to allow you to focus upon what you know best, which is your organization. With IRIS and with Risk Retina, we want to put the things in context for you so you can understand what's happening with sound data, with sound analysis about what's happening from both a quantitative and a qualitative perspective so that you can manage your risk better. So I know we're just about at time there. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll have time for Q&A this webinar there, but please, write to us at retina@Cyentia.com. You can also schedule meetings with us straight out at Cyentia.com/iris and /retina. And we would love to be chatting more with you. Thank you so much for attending. And yes, there will be a recording and slides available in the coming days. Thank you so much and have a great day, everybody.